Hello everybody, welcome back to your fourth lesson on mountains. And today what we're going to do is we're going to be understanding what it's like for people to live on and around mountains. We're going to be looking at some of the difficulties that they face, and then we're also going to be looking at some of the adaptations that some people and animals have made to be able to make living on mountains more comfortable. So before we look at that, let's have a think about what are the actual benefits and uses of mountains, because there are some positive to mountains. So mountains actually bring in climbers and tourists who come to visit them for the scenery. So this can bring in money for the country if they make the tourists pay. Farmers can also graze their animals on them. So if there's lots of grassy land near the mountains, farmers can use this land for their animals to graze. Water authorities make reservoirs and pump the water to the towns and cities nearby, which is also really good. And forestry companies grow coniferous forests and harvest wood on mountain land. So there's some of the benefits to it. So we also have lots of people that actually live in mountains. And it's actually estimated that around 12% of the world's 6.8 billion people actually live in mountain areas. This means that there's about 3/4 billion, around 750 million people living in mountain areas. So the Alps are actually the most densely populated mountain area in the world, and 13 million people live in the Alps. Nearly half, which is about 46%, of these people live in the mountains in Asia and the Pacific region. So people, as well as other animals and plants, have actually adapted to living in the mountains. For example, the South American Uru tribe have larger hearts and lungs, which means it's easier for them to breathe in the thin air at the high altitude. So right up at the top of the mountain where there's less oxygen, the South American Uru tribe actually have developed larger hearts and lungs, so they're able to breathe easier. So let's look at some of the difficulties then of living on and around mountains. One of the difficulties is that it's quite difficult to build roads and railways across mountains. This is due to its rocky terrain. And it means that if you live on or around a mountain, it could be very difficult for you to travel for sort of medical reasons. If you've got a medical emergency, you need to travel. It might be quite difficult because there might be one road going through the mountain. Also, it would be quite difficult to go and get supplies, so like food and building supplies, medical supplies again to go and get medication. Also, just to go and see other people, you might feel quite isolated if you're just stuck in your one village. Because it is difficult to move along. Also, if you have any bad weather, such as a snowstorm, you are going to be trapped in. So it's not like here, if you have a little bit of snow, you can still, you are still quite mobile, you can get around. If you have a snowstorm in the mountains, you will sort of be halted. So you've got to make sure that you've got enough food and medical supplies, etc., to last you. It's also another difficulty is that it's hard to farm on mountains. So that, again, this is due to the ground being quite rocky and the temperature really cold and icy. It's difficult for farmers to bring up animals, live produce, as well as growing fruit and vegetables. So due to it being difficult for you to actually farm your own food, this means that you do have to then go and get your produce from elsewhere. Then going back to the lack of transport, this is even more difficult. And our final difficulty is that the weather is often more hostile and there's less oxygen. So mountains are very high above sea level, and this means that it's extremely cold and icy near the top of mountains. It also means there's less oxygen and the oxygen is actually thinner. So often when tourists climb really tall mountains, they actually have to carry oxygen tanks when they're climbing up the top of the mountain because the oxygen is so thin up there. They find it really difficult to breathe, so sometimes they have to take oxygen masks to help them breathe. So as I mentioned before, one way that the South American Uru tribe have adapted to survive better living on the mountain is by having larger hearts and lungs, as it helps them breathe in the thin air at the higher altitudes. So not only have we got the South American Uru tribe that have adapted to live on mountains, we've also got lots of different animals that have adapted themselves to live on mountains. And we're going to be looking at 3 animals. Our first one is the brown bear. Now, the brown bears live in the forest and mountain regions of Asia, Europe, and northern North America. Because their natural habitats are so cold, they've actually developed a really thick coat of fur and layer of fat that helps to insulate them. The long claws of brown bears, although they can seem intimidating, then they don't actually retract. They're not retractable, which means they're always out. So if you notice a cat, their claws are retractable, so the claws go back into their paws, whereas a bear's claws are always out. This means that they're fairly blunt because they've sort of been scraped on the floor. So brown bears actually use these for digging in under the ground to help them dig and find food. We've also got bighorn sheep. So bighorn sheep are very well adapted for climbing and descending the steep terrain that they live on the mountains. They also actually have a good distance from the ground, so then because they're quite large animals, even though they're walking on the floor, they are quite tall, which means they keep a distance from the ground. Golden eagles do sometimes attack and kill lambs. Golden eagles are another animal that live on the mountains. But that lamb, so that's baby sheep, whereas the bighorn sheep, the older ones, the golden eagles don't often attack because they're sort of too big. So the way that the bighorn sheep have adapted well for climbing and descending steep terrain is that their hooves are actually in two parts, so that they can cling firmly to steep and rocky terrain. The hooves are also spongy right in the centre with a hard outer edge, and as a result, the padded, soft, rubbery soles actually help them to keep their traction, keep themselves gripped to the mountainside, and it helps them balance as they move up the sheer, so the steep rock faces, and through the uneven and slippery ground. And the last animal that we're going to look at is the mountain hare. So mountain hares are well adapted to their cold, snowy environments. They actually molt just twice a year, and they change their coat colour to blend in with the environment around them. So you can see this is a rabbit here that has just changed its coat colour to white, ready for the snowfall. And then when it is more summer and the snow has melted, they actually change their coat colour to a more of a browny colour to match the terrain, which is shown here. So their winter coat actually includes heavily back paws, which act like snowshoes. They also spread their weight over a large surface area to stop them sinking too far into the snow. So their large paws give them a bigger surface area so they don't sink and fall into the snow. Okay, so they are our animals that we're going to be looking at. Now I'm just going to show you your worksheet. So you have got 4 short activities today. Your first activity is to list some of the advantages of mountains. So if I was you, I would go back onto this video, go right to the start, look at the advantages of mountains, the benefits, and you can use these to help you with your assignment. So the fact that there's often climbers and tourists which can visit them. Farmers can let their animals graze on the mountain areas. Water authorities can make reservoirs and pump the water to the towns and cities. And forestry companies grow and forest and harvest wood on them. So go back to the video and use it to help you. Your second activity is to list some of the disadvantages to living on and around a mountain. So again, go back on the video, go back and pause it and use it to help you do this worksheet. So for example, it's difficult to farm on mountain land. The weather is really bad and there's less oxygen, etc. So there's 3 disadvantages that I would like you to do there. Your third activity is to list the adaptations these animals have made to live on the mountain. So you've got brown bear, and then in this box here, I want you to tell me how was the brown bear adapted to live on the mountains. The same with the bighorn sheep and the same with the mountain hare. And then for activity 4, what I would like you to do is, I'm going to put that on the bottom here, is I would like you to pick one of these animals. It can be any animal, so either the brown hare, the bighorn sheep, or the mountain hare. And I would like you to do your own research into this animal and find out a little bit more information about them, and find out a bit more information about where they live in the mountain areas, how they have adapted, and sort of any other interesting facts that you can find out about this animal. So don't forget that this worksheet is going to be posted onto Teams, and we will be checking to see if you've finished the worksheet or not. But make sure you're using this YouTube video to help you. That's what it's here for. It's there to help you think of your own answers. We look forward to reading your assignments, and I look forward to your 5th and final lesson tomorrow on mountains. Thank you.